There is some mild debate in the personal finance space whether credit scores actually matter, and I'm here to tell you, they absolutely matter. Hi friends, welcome back to the Avocado Toast Budget. If you're new here, my name is Lexa, and today we are going to talk about everything you need to know about credit scores. I know credit scores can kind of be this like elusive thing. It's this number that you're not really sure what it means or how you're supposed to change it, but it always just seems to go down a lot easier than it goes up. We're going to talk about why, what makes up a credit score, if they matter, and how you can go about improving or building your credit score. And I'm here to tell you the answer is probably a lot simpler than you would think it would be. We've got a lot of important stuff to cover, so let's go ahead and get into it. So I want to give real quick a definition and kind of like an overview of what a credit score even is in case you are not familiar with it. Before we hop into like the nitty-gritty of things and how you can start to improve it, you need to know what it is in the first place. So a credit score is basically just like a predictor of how likely you are to pay back your loans that you take out and the debt that you take on time and then eventually in full. Basically, it's supposed to be a way for different lenders to determine how trustworthy you are when it comes to debt. Typically, the score is between 300 and 850 being like the perfect score. And in the US, the most common scoring system that we use and we refer to a lot is the FICO score. There are other systems, but that is the one like hands down most commonly used by different financial institutions. Now, you might also hear people refer to like the credit bureaus, and these are the 3 different companies that track your entire credit report. Credit report is a little bit more in depth than just your score. It goes into a lot of the details of what makes up that score and all of your history, payments, and all of that. But just so you know, you have Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. This is important to know because depending on your lender and who they use, the FICO score might like differ a little bit between those 3. Generally, the rules we're going to talk about apply to any of them. It's just how they calculate it. It's complicated. It really doesn't matter for our purposes. So now that we've established what credit scores are, why do they matter in the first place? Because I am so open to like personal finance is personal, some differing opinions on how you manage your money, but it's so frustrating when people say that credit scores don't matter or they're an I love debt score.
Once you understand that, the FICO score is not an I'm good with money score. It's an I love debt score. So when the guy goes, well, I'm doing okay, I've got an 850 credit score, what he really meant was, I'm pretty stupid.
And that if you never plan on taking on debt again, then it doesn't matter what your credit score is and you can tank it, because that's so not true. You never know what life is going to throw at you and when you might want to like buy a house, not in cash, or you need a car loan or whatever. But on top of that, even if you truly never plan on taking on any more debt, credit scores can impact your life. A big one is if you are a renter. A lot of times, especially lately, if you live in an apartment complex that is owned by like a bigger company, they will request some sort of like a credit score, and that can determine your eligibility to rent from there. It can determine what your security deposit is. For me, I didn't have to put a security deposit down on my apartment because of my credit score. That is a huge financial benefit of having a credit score and having a decent one. But it also means if you have low credit or no credit, you might be stuck renting from either sketchier places or paying more in rent, even though it has nothing to do with taking on more debt. Another one is utilities. Utility providers can actually either require some sort of a deposit or deny you eligibility based on your credit score and your credit history. Now, another one that's kind of like an ish is job promotions or jobs in general, because it's a myth that jobs can like deny you based on a credit score. That's not true. They can't see your credit score, but they can request an abbreviated credit report. And a lot of times this happens with like if you're moving into a position where you have to deal with the company's finances, or if you're moving into a position where you could be bribed or something. They want to know if like you have any cobwebs of finance things that someone could bribe you with. For the majority of people, that's not relevant, but that it just is something to consider. Now, credit scores are made up of 5 different factors: payment history, amounts owed, or sometimes referred to as credit utilization, length of credit history, new credit, and credit mix. Now you might be thinking, Lexa, that sounds great. What the hell does any of that mean? So let me give you a quick rundown. Payment history refers to the percent of on-time payments that you've made to your debt and your loans. AKA, are you making your minimum payments on time? Now, notice that I said this is expressed as a percent. So the more payments that you have throughout your history, the less that a missed payment or a late payment starts to affect this part of your score. Because missing one payment when you've only ever made 10 payments has a bigger impact than if you've missed one payment but you've made 1,000 other payments. Next is amounts owed or credit utilization. This part is usually referring to how much of your available credit are you using and a little bit of a mixture of how much debt do you have overall. Now, similarly to the on-time payments, the credit utilization is also expressed as a percent. But whereas you would want a higher percentage of on-time payments, you want a lower percentage of credit utilization. Usually you're aiming for under 30, but ideally under 10%. And don't worry, we'll talk more about that in a second. The next is a length of credit history, which is pretty much exactly as it sounds, just how long have you had credit for. This could include credit cards, auto loan, student loans, mortgage, anything like that. New credit involves how many new hard inquiries have you had to your credit score. Hard inquiries are typically what happens when you are looking into getting a new line of credit, a personal loan, or a mortgage. And finally, credit mix, which is just how many different types of credit do you have. Because a credit card is technically considered a revolving line of credit, that is going to differ from like having a student loan, or a mortgage, or a car loan. So we've come to the point of like, what the hell am I supposed to do with that information? And my recommendation, especially as a beginner, is to focus on two different factors. And those are your payment history and your credit utilization. Because together, those make up 65% of your credit score. So focusing on those two things is going to have a much higher impact than focusing on something like types of credit, which only makes up 10% of your score. And we're not trying to spend our entire life worrying about a credit score, so we're focusing on big picture things here. So first things first, on-time payments make up 35% of your credit score. So how does this play a factor in helping us to build a credit score and also helping you to increase your credit score if you already have one? I want to make it clear when it comes to on-time payments, this is usually referring to your minimum payment. This might be different than like paying your card in full every month. And while I highly recommend doing that if possible when it comes to credit cards, really what this is just assessing is, are you making that minimum payment on time and consistently every month? Now, I actually have a personal story with this because for the first time ever, last year, I missed a payment on my credit card. Something was like charged to a credit card that I never use anymore. And I had auto pay set up, but something happened with it and it didn't go through. Took me a few months to realize before I had like racked up a bunch of late fees, and it was already reported to the credit bureau. And this tanked my score a lot. I've had credit cards for a while, so I have a lot of on-time payments, but something to note about payment history is that a missed payment is going to affect your score more right off the bat, and then as time goes by, it'll start to affect it less and less. So my score tanked like more than 60 points overnight, but it's been about 6 months now, and I've already gotten my score back up to where it was. So it really sucked there for a while, especially to see my score go from like 730 to in the mid 60s because of like one missed payment, one accident. But just know it is not going to stay like that forever. Again, it is expressed as a percent. So the more on-time payments that you make, the less that is going to affect your credit score, and the more time that goes on, the less it's going to affect. Usually this drops off your credit in full after 7 years. So since this is such a big part of your credit score, focus on making your minimum payments on time. If you run into a situation where you're not going to be able to make a payment, call ahead of time. It is so much better to set up some sort of a payment plan, get on the same page with your lender than it is to try to ask for forgiveness after you've already missed it. If you have multiple different credit cards or loans that you are paying on, make sure that you have all of them set to auto pay and you know when each one of them is set to come out. I have reminders set on my phone and my Google Calendar for a couple days before and the day that they are due, just so I can go in and double check, make sure that the auto pay system worked and everything is good to go, and to make sure that you have enough money in your bank account to cover that payment. Along with making your payments on time, another big part of your credit score is that credit utilization. So as I kind of briefly mentioned, ideally you want to keep your credit utilization under 10%, but what does that mean? So for example, if I have one credit card that has an $8,000 credit limit and then another one that has a $2,000 credit limit, my goal would be to have less than $1,000 on that card the time the end of the cycle comes around. Now, this is important to notate the difference because on your credit card, you usually have two different dates. One is the end of the cycle, which is like when they start tracking how much do you have on your card right now. And then there's the due date. And typically this ranges, but typically you have about 20 to 25 days between the end of like your statement cycle and when that payment is due. So what you are aiming for is to have less than $1,000 between, in this example, between those two cards on the end of the statement cycle day. So that means that you could spend more than $1,000 on your credit card if you're able to pay it down before the end, because that on that date is what they are going to report to the credit bureaus. Now, of course, in an ideal world, if you can pay off your credit card every month in full, that's the way to go. However, if you are someone who is struggling with credit card debt, I've been there, and you hold a balance on your credit card every month. You want to continue again to make your on-time minimum payments because that affects the 35% payment history. But there are two different ways for you to kind of lower your credit utilization. Since it is expressed in a percentage, you can either lower your credit card balance, which again, you can do in an ideal world, but if you don't have the money, another way is to increase your available credit. Now, I say this with a big caveat because if you are someone who struggles with overspending on a credit card, it might not be worth it to take this route. Because one option that you do have is either opening up a new credit card, a new line of credit so you can start to decrease the percentage that you're using, or asking for a credit limit increase. However, this can quickly backfire for you because the more available credit you have, the more you might end up overspending. So if you think that there's any chance that you are going to struggle with not overspending even more on your credit card, it's not worth it. A few extra points on a credit score is not worth the interest that you will be paying on racking up even more credit card debt. And I say that with the least amount of judgment in the world because I have been there. Capital One played me good. I had like a max credit limit of $500, and when I started maxing that out, they just kept upping it until I was up to like $9,000 of credit card debt because that was my limit. Now, of course, once you have advanced from the beginner stages of managing your credit score, there are things that you can do to kind of increase it a little bit here and there using the other three parts of your credit score. But I really believe that for beginners, focusing on the payment history and credit utilization is going to make the most difference for you. Now, you might be asking, what if I don't have a credit score? How am I supposed to start building one? So let's talk about that because it can kind of seem a little weird with credit scores because to build credit, you have to have credit because a lot of times you can't get a line of credit without showing that you have a history of having and managing credit. So what are you supposed to do? One of the biggest things that I recommend for people is looking into a secured credit card. Now, I had no idea this was even an option for a long time, and it is really great if you are someone who has low credit and you are wanting to start building it back up, or you don't have any credit and you don't know where to even start. A secured credit card works kind of like a credit card in the sense that they report on-time payments to the credit bureaus to start building up that payment history. However, it doesn't require you to have a credit score because instead the security that the credit card company would get through a higher credit score is secured through you making a refundable deposit. So for example, a lot of times it's like a few $100s. You give them $200 and that $200 becomes your credit limit. You continue to still have to pay that every month, meet your minimum payments, treat it like a typical credit card. But I usually tell people just put like one small bill on that credit card every month and forget it. Like don't spend money on that every month, just have that bill and set to auto pay in full. And then when you either close that credit card or a lot of them will upgrade you from like a secured card to a real credit card, they will refund you that $200. It kind of works like a security deposit because if in the chance that you don't make your payments and you rack up $200, technically you've already paid them that money because they have that security deposit there. I've talked about some of my favorite secured cards and the best credit cards for people who have low credit or no credit. I will link that video up here for you. But I think it is really important to just reiterate that it is only worth using a credit card or using debt to build up your credit if you are not paying interest. You can use your credit card to build up your credit score without ever having to pay a single penny in interest if you pay it off in full on time every single month. That is, in an ideal world, the best way to go. However, if you are already in credit card debt, hopefully some of these tips can kind of help you to navigate that situation. But just keep in mind, it is never worth going even further into debt just to increase your score a few points. Now, if you are dealing with debt and collections or you want like some more nuanced tips, I've talked about different tips on how to improve your credit score. I will link that video up here. I really hope that you enjoyed and you learned something cool. If you did, please remember to give this video a big thumbs up. It really helps out the YouTube algorithm, helps boost this video to the top. That way more people can find this content. And I will see you all next time. Bye.